Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast on the Her Hoop Stats Podcast Network. I'm Crina Mustafa alongside Calvin Wetzel, and today is a bit of a bittersweet episode. It is our last one as a duo. Coast to Coast is not technically going to be over, but it is the last one where I am kind of in it. For those of you who don't know, which is probably a lot of you because I haven't really announced anything, I recently got a full-time job with a team here in Toronto. It is on the PR side of it all, and so I'm taking a step back from everything content-wise to focus on this, and that means no more coast to coast with Crina and Cal. I mean, we'll see the future of the podcast, but I was going to ask you, Cal, are you ready? But I
Uh,
feel like I'm not fully ready.
no, I think you know the answer to that. I'm definitely not ready for this to be over, but I'm so happy for you. More importantly, getting an amazing job. I know you've been looking for that for a while, and so well deserved. So obviously, very very ready for that, and to see where this next journey takes you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It'll be nice to have a little bit of stability and maybe focus on like lesser things at a time than have like 52 tasks across 52 different outlets. It is a bit of a new journey for me. I did a little bit of PR like this year working with Canada basketball, but this will be my first like fully immersive role in that. So I'm excited to see, and it's still in basketball, which is really, really nice. So yeah, that's kind of been it. We've done this podcast for over a year now, I think a year and a few months, which is kind of wild because I almost feel like we've been doing this podcast for like my entire life. Like it feels like this has just become such a common part of my weekly like routine and lifestyle that I'm like, yeah, of course. Like we're recording coast to coast on Wednesdays. Like that's our thing. That's what we've been doing. I almost can't remember a time before the podcast that we were not doing this. And I'm just very grateful that it's given me like one of my closest friends over the last year and a bit. So yeah, that's been a year and I think 3 months of coast to coast, something like that. I was gonna ask you, what were your favorite like moments or episodes or interviews maybe we've done on the show? I think for me at least, like when we did that episode with Brina Maxwell, I think that's probably one of my favorite things we've ever done. Just being able to connect with athletes, and we had a lot of amazing people come on, but that's definitely a highlight of mine. But yeah, Cal, do you have any favorite moments from the podcast?
Yeah, Brenna was great, and Ari was really fun as well when we had her.
Yeah.
I know we had a few guests, but for me, like my favorite moments were just us chopping it up on here, goofing around, like making terrible puns. Like if I would have had time, I probably would have like come up with some collect like montage, whatever the word is, of like all of our awful puns. Put those together. But
Can you imagine? Oh
honestly,
my God.
people would have like shut this off right now. They would have been like, "Oh, glad this podcast is over." But that's why I didn't do it. But honestly, like more than the basketball analysis, just like you said, you've become like a really good friend, and just being able to like look forward to this every week, getting on here and talking hoops has been like one of my favorite things.
Damn, we're both about to cry on this episode. It's a sad one today, y'all. Oh my God. I'm already like a very emotional person, so I haven't been sure like how to process a lot of this, because it is a period of change. So, like I said, the future of the show is kind of unknown. Cal will continue to keep y'all updated, whether that means a new co-host, whether that means a new format or a structure. But really, really, I have really enjoyed doing this. I think loving the fact that we had a space where we can just dive into everything women's basketball. I think that's a privilege in this space almost when there aren't a lot of resources a lot of times, and there aren't really a lot of gigs where you can feel like you can do what you want almost, and not in just like a random like free like will way where we just like go off the rails and talk about whatever, but in the sense of we know which stories we want to talk about. We know what we want to kind of bring forward and dive into a little bit more and speak in a way that I'm hoping was easily digestible for everybody to kind of listen along. So yeah, it's been a fun time, and Don't worry, we're not going to leave without jumping into our performances of the week, which we've been doing during the college season, which actually is something else that I've been kind of grateful to dive more into. I think this podcast has really allowed me to really get into college basketball. Whereas, like, as you guys know, and this is kind of a little hint for the segment, I'm Canadian, so that hasn't always been super accessible here. And after getting into the W, I was able to get more into college basketball as well, because really previously I had only watched like the Final Four and just like the final weekends of March Madness, because that was what was being broadcasted up here. But doing this pod has really allowed me to watch, regular season basketball and get to know the college players a little bit better, so that by the time we get to the pro level, we're able to bridge that gap and understand who these players are. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into our performances of the week. And like I said, we're keeping the Canadian theme this week. We kind of have to. It feels only right. And for me, I think to kind of encapsulate all the performances of the week that we've kind of talked about so far, I've turned it into like a formal shout out to a lot of the players that we've talked about this season, whether that was Toby from Duke, Sila from Michigan, Jasmine Basco from Villanova. I think there have been a lot of players, a lot of which, like all three of those, are all freshmen. And I think that really speaks to the future of Canadian women's basketball and the future of the talent in Canada and where that's kind of going. And hopefully, as the Olympics come around again in 2028, we have a solid foundation to keep pushing and rival the US, maybe, hopefully, at some point. That would be quite nice. But no, it's been really cool to watch them kind of do their thing and flourish in their roles. And I mean, Toby just had another career high 27 points. If we want to pick a performance of the week, she had 27 points in her first ACC play against Virginia Tech. And I mean, just phenomenal, like just phenomenal player. She is like doing this as a freshman has been so impressive. And obviously, like not every game has been perfect. Like I said, she is a freshman, so there's a bit of a learning curve there. But honestly, like each one of these players brings something unique to their game, and I hope that you fall in love with them a little bit, but just like I have over the last few years, either whether it was because I worked with them or just started watching them more because I was covering them and things like that.
Yeah, I love that you just had to blanket shout out to Canadian basketball players, because I think like one of the biggest things I've gained from doing this pod is like a bigger appreciation of Canadian basketball and how much talent comes from Canada. And like you said, with all these freshmen, it's only growing, the talent and like the level of influence that Canada has on kind of the basketball world is only skyrocketing, it feels like. So I had to end by also picking a Canadian, of course, Tiana Todd from Boston College, who I think is pretty improved this year. Boston College is, and a big reason is the shooting of Tiana Todd, almost 50% from three on multiple makes per game, pretty high volume. She's been lighting it up this year. And according to Synergy, a lot of these are guarded threes. Most of these, more than most people in the country, guarded threes. So these are not wide open. She's hitting threes in everybody's face. Performance of the week, she dropped 21 the other day in the ACC opener on Virginia to start Boston College off 1-0 in ACC play. And I know you said off air that you have a little bit of writing on her. I don't know if that's come out yet or if that's coming out at some point. Everyone should go check that out whenever it is. But definitely someone to keep an eye on. And I think one of my favorite parts of this pod, by the way, too, aside from the Canada aspect, is just like you said, having our own space to do our own thing. And like nobody's telling us we got to talk about like this player or that player who's getting all the headlines. Like we could talk about players from Canada, mid-major players, players from teams that aren't in the top 25. We've been able to talk about whoever we want. So I'm going to talk about Tiana Todd today because that's who I feel like talking about. So that's been something that I've really enjoyed about this podcast as well. If you want to talk about going back to our first segment, favorite moments and favorite things from this pod.
No, for sure. We really do what we want on this podcast, but it's all good, and hopefully people have connected with it. But yeah, even just like the writing I've done on Todd. So I've been writing a column called the Naismith Notes for Canada Basketball over the last year, and I've been doing it a lot more in the last couple of months. And part of that is just keeping tabs on all the Canadians that have played for Canada basketball and what they're doing, and a part of that are the NCAA athletes. And so I kind of have to make sure that I have like eyes and ears on pretty much what every Canadian player has been doing, which is why I think I've been able to pay a bit more attention about more of these Canadian college players and just like the mainstream ones as well. And she has been a player that has popped up a couple of times that I've written about in this column, and obviously doesn't get as much of the national attention, which is fine. There's you can't cover every team and every player and all of that, but she is a player that I think is super fun to watch, and I've enjoyed writing about her because the more Canadians I can write about, the happier I am. So yeah, I'm really glad you chose her this week. I think that's a really solid pick, and Boston College is a feisty team, and so yeah, those are our we might as well rename the segment to Canadian performances of the week at this point. Like, that's really what it was. Like, we stepped outside that boundary a few times, which I guess is enough to not change the name, but it feels very like 60-40 type of vibe.
Absolutely, and as it should be.
Yeah, agreed. And now, of course, we will finish off with our games to watch. It is a bit of a shorter episode this week because I don't want to cry on camera. I feel like that'd be a bad way to go out on coast to coast. But we got a couple of really, really good matchups, which like it's getting closer to holiday season, so there might be a little bit of a break here and there. But the big one, which is happening on the day that you were listening to this podcast, Thursday, December 12th, is UConn versus Notre Dame at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. That is, of course, the headline matchup. UConn obviously has been fantastic to start the season. I'm really happy to see Paige hooping. Really hope AZ can get back onto the court with her knee thing, which I think from what the reports were is obviously not as serious with what she's had to deal with over the last or her previous years in college. So hopefully she's back soon because Cal and I, we both really hate injuries, and this is a player that we would love to see healthy. And I almost wish that she would have suited up for this one. But Notre Dame, another team which we've talked about a little bit in terms of being a little bit up and down, they have beat a lot of good teams and they are building something good. They still got a couple of players out as well too. But I'm really actually excited to watch this one because it should be a really fun game. Olivia Miles, Sony Citron, Hannah Hidalgo versus Paige and the rest of the UConn players. But what are you looking forward to the most for UConn versus Notre Dame?
I love the rivalry aspect, and another game I'm going to talk about is that as well. But I think like that's so good for the game when you get that kind of stuff going on. And like you said, I really wish AZ could play in this game. This game feels like it deserves in like Maddie Westbell, just everyone who's out
Yeah.
that it feels like it deserves everyone at full strength, and especially tough for someone like AZ who's dealt with injuries to see that come up. But like you said, hopefully not as serious. A couple other games that I'm looking forward to this week too are Iowa, Michigan State. Good test for Michigan State, who I'm still really high on, but has not had a ton of very extreme tests yet this year.
Yeah.
NC State, Louisville on Sunday. That's an ABC game. That's going to be fun. Then also, this helps absolutely no one who's listening because it's happening tonight as we record. So thanks, Calvin, for telling us a game we can't watch because it already happened. But I love the Iowa matchups. And as we record on Wednesday, the Iowa State game is happening tonight. So I will be tuning into that. But I know that you said you didn't want to get emotional or anything, but I felt like I couldn't leave this pod without also just saying that it has been such a joy and an honor working with you the last year plus. Have learned so much from you doing this, and I feel like you have made me a better podcaster, just holding down the host role, being my point guard. So I'm so grateful that I got to do this for a year, and so happy for you that you're getting this opportunity. This is you had to do that for the YouTube plug, didn't you? We haven't done the YouTube plug
I
yet.
did. I did. Yeah. I just pulled out a tissue from my Kleenex box and started dabbing away tears for those of you who are listening on audio.
Yeah,
Had
yeah.
to.
I
It's also actually, funnily enough, it's the last Kleenex in the box, and
Oh
this is the
no.
last episode that we're doing
Wow.
together. Talk
Did you
about
plan that?
symbolism.
Did
I
you take
actually
all the
didn't.
other ones
I
before and like set them
No, I
aside just
actually didn't.
for the bit?
This is fully fully not planned,
Organic.
which I feel
The
like is
Kleenex
where
box
some of our
knew.
best work happens, you know?
It did. Our best work was just the organic stuff that just came up, and so I'm gonna miss that a lot. But I'm so happy that you got this opportunity, like I said, and there's no one who deserves it more than you. I will say that like I knew you before doing this podcast, and I knew you as a friend, but I hadn't like worked in any sort of like content or professional setting with you before. So I just knew you were a good person. In doing this, I have now learned how much of a hard worker you are and like how committed you are to always being the best at everything you do and why you are like a slam dunk hire for anyone, not just as a person, but just as someone who puts out amazing content in like any facet that you're involved with. Doing like from day one doing this pod, like how prepared you were and everything, and how easy you made it on me with the notes and stuff like that. Um, was just so like I learned so much more about like how much you deserve opportunities like this. So really happy for you.
Oh my
Keep doing big
god.
things. Keep doing big things, my friend.
Cal, thank you so much. You have made me so much smarter, like in the basketball space. Like, yes, I am, the one who leads on the conversation, but I almost feel like I'm just sitting here learning from you and the way that you view the game. So you make it easy. You make it easy for me to segue through topics. You make it easy for me to come up with stupid puns when we're talking about certain things. And yeah, it's changed the way that I view the game for sure. And I feel like I've become smarter because of it. And yeah, I really appreciate you so much. It's funny because when right before we started the podcast, you and I don't know if you remember, but we were kind of like, I wonder if we're gonna like go against each other and like disagree on certain things and knock heads, and that never really happens. Like maybe like once, twice, I can't even remember. But I think, that just goes to show how well we've gotten along. And that's not to say that we're just like two bobbleheads who are saying, yeah, yeah, exactly. It's just we've just learned from each other, and it's more just like building on everything that we say, and being like, oh, like that's so true. I'm so glad you said that because I see it too. And it's some things like that. So I just really appreciated that. And I hope people had fun listening to the both of us. But is there anything else you want to say before we get out of here for episode 61 of Coast to Coast?
Yeah, I think I'm fresh out of sentimental, sappy stuff. So
You're like, I'm done. You're as empty as my Kleenex box.
I
There
just
you
want
go.
to say everything. Yeah, it's been a joy working with you, like I said, and I'm so excited to see where this journey takes you, and so grateful that I was a little part of this last chapter of it.
I appreciate that. And I'm gonna be so cheesy and say it's not goodbye. It's see you soon. I'll continue to stick around in whatever capacity. I've really, really enjoyed doing this podcast. It has been one of the highlights of the last year and a bit for me. Yeah, it's given me a lot, and I will cherish like all the time that we had together doing this. And keep watching Canadian Hoopers, keep up with all the good basketball that's happening. There is so much happening in the world of women's basketball right now, and I'm almost excited to be able to be a fan now. And because the job is in the NBA space, and it's gonna be nice to just be like, hey, let me just go to a game, or let me just go watch this and um, be a little bit more of a, not that I wasn't before, but be a little bit more of a fangirl, even though that's kind of been my whole brand in this space, but still doing it respectfully. And oh, one last shout out. Michigan women's basketball is ranked finally consistently, and I just want to say I'm
Go
really happy
Sila.
the voters have got it right. Go Silence, go Michigan. They should have been ranked after the first week, but whatever, it's fine. Um, it's all good. But yeah, I think that does it. Make sure you're following Her Hoop Stats at Her Hoop Stats wherever you are on social media, on Blue Sky, on Twitter or X or Instagram, wherever you are. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube at Her Hoop Stats. Cal will make sure to keep you guys updated on the future of the Coast to Coast podcast, which I'm sure will come very, very soon. You can follow myself at Crina if you'd like. but not that I'll be posting a lot anymore. But, you can follow Cal at cwetzel31, which is what I recommend doing following today's episode. And really, really appreciate everyone who has rocked with us and tapped in with us for the last year and a bit. And yeah, I guess thanks for going coast to coast with us every week. See ya.